Hey everybody, welcome. It is Wednesday, October 27th. October is almost over. Hi Megan, how are you?
Hi, doing well. We're getting geared up for Halloween this weekend.
Yeah, you and I were trying to get our tech geared up before we started. Hopefully we've got it. I There are days I think that the closer we get to Halloween, the more my tech starts to get freaky on me. So
Yeah, I definitely think my modem and router is haunted. That's for sure.
yeah, it feels that way, doesn't it? I know a lot of people feel like their studies may have been a little haunted. We got some results out this week, particularly in Georgia, and we're going to talk about that later today. And then we are going to do something that is as frightening as any trick or treat Halloween haunted house I've ever done. In a moment of craziness, we agreed that we were going to take what we thought of as the 10 hardest MBE questions of all time, and we would try to work through them together to show you how we would deal with them. And we're going to do that today. So I'm excited to share that with you. I will say that really we got a couple ready to go today, and they weren't too bad. I was surprised, weren't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think they're manageable. Now I'm getting a little see the list of the 10 that we're going through. So I'm a little curious to see what happens when we start getting down the list. But yeah.
I think we're ramping up. So stay with us for that. That'll be a lot of fun. It's going to be interactive. You get to play if you're here live, and if you're watching later on replay, you still get to play. We don't know what you did. So there you go.
So we got results since last week in Delaware, Ohio, Georgia, and Minnesota. And I think very interesting is our outlier in a positive way, in terms of repeat pass rate. They were at 41.5%, which is just leaps and bounds beyond where other jurisdictions are. So I found that sort of interesting. I don't know what's going on.
Small sample size, I think, is the answer. But Georgia stayed more in line with the rest of the country, right?
Yes, Georgia had a 14.1% repeat pass rate. So that's definitely echoing what we're seeing. We've just seen a lot of new students join us from other courses who just failed the Georgia bar. So I was not surprised to see this very low repeat pass rate in Georgia. But interesting because it's almost as low as Florida's, right? Which is really and their overall pass rate is almost as low as Florida's. Their repeater pass rate is significantly lower than Florida's. But I found that interesting that even their overall rate is really it's pretty low. I don't always think of Georgia as being up there as one of the absolute toughest, but I think that's certainly where it's looking to be right now.
Well, there's an interesting component to this. This was an open book exam for the essays in July in Georgia. So what does that tell you when it's an open book exam and we have this kind of a pass rate? What inference would you make from that?
Yeah, certainly that just knowing the law is not enough to get you to pass the exam, which is what we've been saying for a long time.
Yeah, I think it should be pretty clear to people that's the case. Now, in the offer tab, I put up a link to our free webinar. It's called 6 Keys to the Pass List. This was a study that was done a couple of years ago and just released for the New York bar examiners, but really applies across the country. And it talks about why people don't pass the exam, repeat bar takers in particular. And it makes the point pretty clearly that just knowing the law by itself is not enough. And I would encourage you to watch this webinar. It's 100 minutes, it's long, but it's on demand, which means you can stop it. But there are 6 specific things that this study produced in the way of keys to making it into the pass list. And I've taken those 6 items and shown how we work with those and how we incorporate them into our course to help people succeed. I think that these Georgia results really underlie that big part of it, which is if I just study more law, I'm going to succeed on the exam. It just isn't that straightforward. And knowing all of the law, even when you've got all the books open in front of you, is not enough if you don't know how to express that knowledge and you don't give the examiners what they're looking for. So you and I just finished, 4 weeks of doing the anatomy of a bar essay, and those videos are available on our site, and I would encourage people to watch that. But ultimately, I just think so many folks are misdirected and misguided, don't you? That they've got the wrong sense of what it is they should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard. I've seen there's been a lot of discussion in the bar exam community lately about these really low repeater pass rates, right? Since this is the first time the NCBE has been releasing them along with the total pass rates. And really the consensus of what I've seen is exactly what we're saying, which is that the fact that these repeater pass rates are so low can only really indicate that people who fail the bar the first time misunderstand some fundamental part of the exam, then they don't correct for it and they continue to fail. So if you have failed the bar, doing the same thing over and over, but studying more in between is really not, clearly by these numbers, it's not going to be enough. I'm sure that 99% of those people studied more, right? Maybe even spent more time in the books than they had before. And it's not that you're not supposed to study, obviously, please don't take that away, but that's not enough. Like, you have to change something fundamentally. There's something you don't understand, something you just don't have the skill to do yet, right? Not ever, just yet. And and a lot of times you probably need help to diagnose that problem and then to correct it.
Yeah, and I think that people who are retaking the exam need more assistance, obviously, than some other folks. And we have a lot of tools to help. I'm putting up the offer for the personal writing workshop that you do, Megan. That's obviously proven to be a big assist to a lot of people. But I'll just underscore this and then we'll move on. If you think that you're going to sit for an exam that you have failed once or more and not change anything fundamentally about the way you're studying and try to do it at the bare minimum, the odds tell us that you're not going to be successful, no matter how talented and good and hardworking you are. You need to put every resource that you can bring to the exam, I think, to be successful. And that's challenging, to be sure. But I think that if you do that, if you put those resources in, if you get the coaching, if you use tools like PhotoReading and Paraliminals, if you mind map, if you take a different approach to your study, all of those things will assist you ultimately in passing the exam, which is the goal. But if you just keep doing the same thing, it is very hard to be successful. So I think it's something that people need to think about and work on, get their heads wrapped around in order to be successful. So there you go. So let's go ahead and move on, and hopefully we'll get to some questions, and we'll see how we do, and then we'll get to the MBE.
Okay. All right. I'm interested in adding photo reading this time. How do I do that?
Yeah. So what we've done with the new course platform is this very cool thing. I got excited about it. I'm not sure anybody else did. But when you go to register and go back into your course now, if you're already a student in our course, you will see when you go back to resume your course, a couple of boxes will show up now, pop-up boxes, offering to help you upload or upgrade your course with some specific products like the coaching calls or photo reading or BarMaps or something else. And what makes it cool is all you do is click on the button. You'll get a 6-digit code sent to you by email to verify that it's you. Once you've verified that, it gets automatically added to your account and put on the same credit card or debit card that you used previously. And it's one button and you can add it to your course. So that is super easy. And you can do that. The other way you can do it is within the course itself. There's a lesson in the course walkthrough, the Start Here, that is upgrading your course, and you will see the links to everything there, not just photo reading, but all the other items. So you can get all of that there. And then, of course, if you're still stuck, you can send us an email. We'll be glad to give you the link. But really, it's all designed to be done within the course platform. We thought that was more convenient for people. And this one button ability to just click it just dazzles me. But then I just got a Venmo account this week for the first time. So I'm easily impressed. So there you go.
Welcome to the 21st century.
So
all right.
sad.
Next is I'm having trouble finding the syllabus of the person.
Yeah, there is no more syllabus in the personal study guide. And I apologize because I think in some of our emails we had referenced it because as we were making the switch over, we just missed a couple of things. But you don't need a syllabus anymore. The great news is you just go into the course platform and it's all right there, and you just go to the next lesson. And some of them will be identified as optional, so you can certainly skip those if you want. We would encourage you to go through everything, but it's sort of a deeper dive on some things, some videos that we've done over the years, but it's all right there. And so all you do is follow that. And each lesson will identify roughly how long it takes to complete. Most of them can be completed in a couple of hours or less. And what I would suggest is that you set up the number of hours you're studying and then just get into the study and go through for that number of hours for a week. And by the way, at this point, I think 4 months out, 20 hours a week is probably where most people will be, don't you think?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So if you're taking the exam in July of 2022, I think 5 to 10 hours a week is more than enough. So, but if you're a February student, 20 hours a week is where I would suggest.
Great. All right. Next, great question. Am I to watch the 3 Anatomy of a Bar Exam videos? They have popped up several times at the end of some lesson videos.
Yeah. So this is funny to me. You know how YouTube always wants you to stay, if you're watching cat videos, they show you more cat videos. This is the same idea. If you're watching, our videos are all hosted either on Vimeo or YouTube. And so when it's done playing, YouTube and or Vimeo will show you some of our other videos as a suggestion. The answer is no, don't watch them there. Wait until you get into the course where we've got, actually in everybody's course platform, we do have the anatomy of an essay now put into your course. There are 4 lectures, as I said earlier, and they're right in your course as an optional assignment. And when you get there, that's when you should do them, when you're into the essay writing part. So don't be watching those cat videos. That's was it TikToks and Reels on Facebook? Yeah. So I'm learning all sorts of new things now. Yeah.
TikTok, you're too old for TikTok.
Whatever. You know. Yeah. The fun part is I understand none of it. So that's, I'm just like, okay, whatever they're doing. Everybody, apparently, how many people can moonwalk together? I don't. Okay. Moving on.
All right. Next, I intend to place an order for the BarMaps. Will I have to do the BarMaps following your study guide, or will I have time on my own to do them? This is because I'm currently on torts and I don't know how that will go alongside with the study guide. Yeah,
it's a good question. BarMaps is a 3-part product. It's detailed or interactive timestamp videos, the same videos that are in the course, but broken down by smaller subject. And then it's the mind maps for the subject, which I think is a great time saver because they already are created for you, at least the base mind map. And then the fast finish audios. So really the way I would do this, it's not written in, there's no syllabus, as I said, so it's not really there. But if you purchase BarMaps, what you're going to want to do, work through the course as normal. When you're ready to go back and review, let's say you're in torts and you don't want to listen to 8 hours of torts lecture again, but you know you're having problems with negligence or strict liability, you go to the BarMaps version of the lecture and you find strict liability, and there it is, and it says it's a 15-minute segment, and you watch that. So it's useful at that. The mind maps are useful right from jump, right? As soon as you get to the subject, pull out the mind maps and start working with them. So you can incorporate that immediately. And if you're a photo reader, that's absolutely vital. But I think for everybody, the mind maps are really great, and I would encourage that. And then in the review at the end, the fast finish audios are compressed versions of the audio of the lectures. We've done them at super high speed, and they're designed for just playing in the background or listening to at night while you're resting. And you could do that at any time. So I finished torts, and now I want to continue to reinforce torts. I could listen to the fast finish audios on torts as I'm going through. So it's not like you have to set time aside specifically for BarMaps. They really come alongside the rest of your study.
Yeah. On a similar vein, the next question is, I'd like to pay for 2 writing sessions offered by Megan. Will they be added to the order of my study guide, or will I have to create time for that on my own? So I can answer this one. Yeah, so no, they're not going to be added into your study guide for you. You get to pick when it makes sense to do it. And let me suggest, do it quickly. As soon as you order the personal writing workshop, you get the link to the calendar. I would just go ahead and schedule the first one. But yes, it's anytime that it makes sense for you to do it. You'll put it into your schedule. You don't have to do any prep work for the first session together. So it's really easy. All you need is 30 minutes to set aside. And then I will give you a homework assignment, an essay to do that you'll need to do before the second. So for that, you will just stick that essay in wherever it makes sense for you as you're going through. Again, I suggest that you do it generally within a week of your first call. I think it's just helpful, that inertia, let inertia help you, right? If you're already moving forward in that direction, keep going. People who wait a really long time tend to sort of get, everything else happens and they never come back to it. So I think that's the most helpful way to do it.
I think the point is that you get started, you get rolling, and the faster you can do that work with Megan, the better. Now, if you're struggling, like these last two questions are talking about how to manage time, we do have a workshop, a seminar with Brianna, one of our group coaches, and she does a great program on time management. It's reasonably priced, 30 minutes with her, and she'll help you set up your schedule and your study guide. So would encourage you to check that out. A half hour with Brianna is gold, like the time with you, Megan. And she takes no prisoners. We're just going to march through and get your schedule set up. And as soon as you start making excuses about how hard your life is, good luck, because Brianna doesn't buy into any of that stuff. She'll just work it through. So encourage you to check that out and use it. It's a good tool. You can use that anywhere, anytime. And the people who have been through that time management workshop have given me great feedback. They're like loving it because very successful for them. So there you go. Okay.
In the chat box had a question. I thought Mind Maps was writing down words to activate photo reading. I just heard about some audios and BarMaps ready for us to see. Am I missing something?
The fast finish audios, which are part of BarMaps, are just designed to supplement what you're already watching in the video. It's just a chance to reinforce that. It doesn't take away from the mind maps or the video lectures. It's just a third method of activating, right?
Great. Okay. And then one last question before we get into the MBE questions. All right. This is a great question and actually way more common than people probably think. I have ADHD and I have questions regarding taking the bar with this condition.
Yeah. So one thing we have to say is that we can't tell a student how to respond to the bar examiners, how to request accommodations or any of those things. And some people will get accommodations for ADHD. A lot of people will not. It just depends on your history and the medical records you submit and frankly, the state you're applying to. So you've got to work on all those things. But I think while you're waiting for an accommodations decision, if you've requested it, you obviously want to study under regular normal time conditions. One of the things that I see, particularly with ADHD, is people trying to slow down when they're studying because they think somehow that'll help them keep their concentration. In fact, it's just the opposite. You need to go faster. Photo reading is a remarkably effective tool for someone with ADHD, ADD, dyslexia, any kind of challenges, because it essentially bypasses the entire prefrontal cortex and goes to your non-conscious brain. And so I think that is a very powerful tool to use. And I would encourage anyone in that situation to look into photo reading. Lots and lots of students over the decade plus with those diagnoses who used photo reading, and it made all the difference in the world for them. And part of the reason is that it allows you to use your intuitive whole brain instead of just what you can charge up in the prefrontal cortex. And that's where things tend to go crazy or haywire for some people. So I think that's part of it. The other part is what we're going to discover today in doing MBE questions, which is that you can become distracted, right, by answer choices, and they can get in the way. And so it's very important to follow the selective intuition method that we're going to try and show you here in a few minutes. So it's not a reason to believe you can't be successful. I've seen so many students, I know you have as well, Megan, who overcome these, we would say, the diagnosis of ADHD or ADD or dyslexia or other things. It is not something to make you think, I can't do it. And I certainly want to say, if you don't get accommodations, don't freak out. You can do everything in the time frames that are given, even with that particular condition. And so if you're following our basic course, you're going to be fine. What we've done is everything is built around getting out of the non-conscious brain. So we're already where you need to be. Right?
And I know we had a student who just passed California recently. Chase Kinney, if you watch her video about passing, she passed the California bar. I worked with her. She has ADHD. And so, yes, if she talks about that in her video, that might be helpful as well. Because sometimes it's really nice to hear from someone, right, who is in your exact same shoes and what they were able to do.
Yeah, and taking the toughest exam in the country and a brutally bad pass rate. And she's very candid about her ADHD diagnosis and the challenges it made and how she worked with it. She worked with Megan, and she used all the tools, PhotoReading and the others. And it's very funny. She talks about, I have no idea how PhotoReading works. It just seemed to work, and it solved that particular part of the problem for me. So that's one of many people that we've interviewed. So definitely want you to know that as frustrating as it is not a complete barrier. So you can get through it. So yeah, good.
All right. We are ready now to tackle our first couple, at least, of the hardest MBE questions.
Okay, so you and I are going to jump off the screen here. I'm going to turn off my video and I'm going to get to screen sharing. And for those of you that are watching with us live today, this is going to be an opportunity for you to participate as well. And I know when we talk about the hardest MBE questions ever, some of you probably can relate to that video. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe I got to do this. It challenges people. So I want to just talk about what we did here, what our methodology was. We have been able over the years to keep huge amounts of data points on questions from every subject to see how many students get each question correct. And what I did is I went through, and outside of civil procedure, I picked really the 10 questions with the lowest pass rate, if you will. And then I added a couple of civil procedure questions that out of our civil procedure group had the lowest numbers of answers correct. I will say that all of the questions we're going to be looking at, 25% or fewer of the people that took the question in practice got it right. And so you might be thinking to yourself, oh my God, what am I going to do to make this work? But we want to break these down and show you how to work. The other thing we want to say is you don't have to get the hardest questions correct in order to be successful. Right, Megan?
Right, exactly. It's a nice thing that this is not the SATs or the LSAT. And so you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get the top score. You just need to get a passing score.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're taking the hardest questions because it's interesting to do that. But really, I think a couple things. One is you're going to say, hey, these questions weren't quite as hard as I expected them to be. But secondly is knowing that you don't get extra points for getting the tough questions correct. We could do the 10 easiest MBE questions, and I bet that some of you would overthink those and miss those, right? And so I think it's important to keep perspective as we talk about it. Now, what we're going to do is actually go through each question. We're going to invite you to try and answer the question along with us. And Megan, you made a good point. And we're going to start with a couple of civil procedure questions. And I think you were talking to me about, well, people say, I haven't studied civil procedure, so how can I do it? What's the response you would give?
Yeah, I think so. For anybody here today who's like, oh no, I'm not going to even guess on these because I haven't gone through civil procedure yet. You all graduated law school, and I know this, you have learned civil procedure. So trust yourself that this knowledge is in there. It might not be right at the top of your mind, but this is not anything that you've never heard before. So trust your instincts a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's jump in and see what we got here. What I'm going to do is actually read the question to you and then walk through the process with Megan of how we would respond to this particular question. So if you're able to watch on screen, go ahead and read it. If you're listening or later and you're listening on the podcast, here we go. The question says that two ranchers, both citizens of State A, brought an action in a state court in State A against a developer who is a citizen of State B. The ranchers alleged a state law tort claim for water runoff damage to their properties caused by construction on the developer's neighboring property. The first rancher claimed $250,000 in damages, and the second rancher claimed $50,000. In their complaint, the ranchers cited federal law regarding the calculation of damages due to water runoff. The developer timely removed the action to federal court. Is removal proper? All right, now, in terms of talking about what the process is, the first thing that I want to say to you is that we're not going to look at the answer choices yet. And for some of you, that'll be stunning, right? You're going to say, wait, I got to know what the answer choices are. But that's exactly where we want to avoid you being distracted on a question like this, right, Megan?
Yes, definitely. This is maybe feels a little counterintuitive, but I think once you've practiced it and you see how it works, you'll find that it's actually a lot less stressful and confusing.
I think so. So let's look at this. And the call of the question is removal proper. So now, if you're in the chat box, I want you to type into the chat box. The answer to that question is either yes, it's removal is proper, or no, it's not, right? It's a binary choice. And you can pretty much guess on an MBE question that if you get a yes, no kind of question, you're going to have two answer choices typically that say yes, two that say no. Sometimes it's 3-1, but often it's a 2 and 2. So what I'd like now is if you're in the chat box, go ahead and type in yes or no, and type in the reason that you think yes or no. In other words, just a broad-based reason that comes to your mind about why removal would be proper. Now, I've put up here on the chart 1 or 2 reasons, but you may not have that. You may not have any, but I just want you to think about it. And again, I want to remind everybody that what we're talking about here is we've got an action in a state court against state A, a developer who's a citizen of state B. The ranchers allege the state law tort claim, and the first rancher claimed $250,000 in damages. The second claimed $50,000, and they cited federal law resulting in the calculation of damages due to water runoff, and the developer then removed the action to federal court. So is removal proper, yes or no? Megan, we getting any answers in the chat box?
Yeah, we have a couple yeses.
So you're saying we're getting some yeses?
People are saying yes, because one person satisfied diversity more than 75K, different state. Yeah. A lot of people saying diversity is proper. There's diversity of jurisdiction.
There you go. All right, so let's see what we got here. Let's look at the answer choices. And I want to just look at each one. And the goal here is if you've got that in mind, that answer, let's say of yes because of diversity, hold that in your brain. Let's look at the 4 answer choices. Answer choice A says no because the ranchers are not diverse from each other. Pretty straightforward. Let's look at B. No, because the second rancher's claim does not meet the amount in controversy requirement. Okay. Oh, here's a yes. Yes, because the complaint includes a federal question. Okay, remember the question here was, is removal proper? And then D, yes, because the ranchers are diverse from the developer and both ranchers' claims arise from the same facts. For those of you who are playing along with us in the chat box, I want you to look at A, B, C, and D, and I want you to mark which one of those letters you think closely matches up with your predetermined answer. So take a second and let people put that in. And Megan, hopefully we'll see some answers in the chat box. All right. And this process, while people are doing that, this process of previewing an answer is an incredibly effective way, because what it does is it allows you to not get distracted by these answer choices, right? It's actually pretty clear when I asked you the question without the answers, but sometimes the answer choices make it more complicated, don't they?
Yes, definitely. So we're getting a lot of answer choices.
D as in dog. All right, well, let's see if those folks are right. And again, the approach here is which answer choice most likely or most closely matches yours. It doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just, we got 4 choices, right? So is it least likely, average, most likely? And I've got the thermometer set at 75%. If I can get 75%, I'm really happy. Maybe I'll only get 50%. All right, so now let's see what we got. Let's look at the answer explanations, and we're going to go through each one. If you chose answer A, that is incorrect. And the reason it's incorrect here is that complete diversity is required between parties who are opposed in interest, but not those aligned in interest. So it's important, I think, this is a subtlety in the question, isn't it, Megan? The ranchers are on the same side of the case, right?
Yes, definitely. So this is one of those ways that I think MBE questions, they try to be tricky. So throwing in that, oh, there's not diversity sort of red herring, when really it doesn't matter because the ranchers are on the same side of the action.
Yeah, and this is where I think people overread, right? They read too much into the question, and then they start analyzing or hyper analyzing, and they get in trouble, and they think, oh, they're both citizens of state A, so therefore that answer choice that said no, because the ranchers are not diverse from each other, doesn't matter, right? They're not diverse from each other, but it doesn't matter because they're on the same side of the case. So answer A was incorrect. What about answer B? Well, answer B is also incorrect. And B said no, because the second rancher's claim doesn't meet the amount in controversy requirement. Now, this is one of those things where you've got to, I think if you know the law, it's an easy answer, right? In 2005, there was a case, Exxon versus Alapata. And in that case, the Supreme Court said that the second claim qualifies for supplemental jurisdiction because it came out of the same controversy. To my mind, that's a pretty logical thing, right? If we're talking about one controversy, why can't we package one claim on top of the other, right? Would you agree, Megan?
Yeah, definitely. I think it makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah, this was one of those cases where I think the Supreme Court finally got around to what logic would tell us, right? Because prior to 2005, you couldn't aggregate your claims for the amount of controversy requirement if you were trying to get diversity jurisdiction. But really, that's not necessary. And the Congress passed a rule that changed it in order to make it more obvious, and the court affirmed that. And one of the questions that comes up, people would say, do I need to know 28 USC 1367, or do I need to know Exxon versus Alapata? No, of course not. You just have to understand conceptually what's going on here. So if you didn't know this, if you thought for some reason that you couldn't aggregate your claims, this is a good item to put into your notes or your mind maps, right?
Yes, I think this is one of those things that if that was a new concept to you, you want to make sure that you just jot it down in your mind map, really simple, so that you will remember it for next time.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's see now. We're down to C or D. Oh, answer C. So those of you that got D, I think you're going to be happy. But let's look at answer C. C, remember, said yes because the complaint includes a federal question. For federal question jurisdiction to exist, the underlying claim has to arise under federal law. But federal question jurisdiction is not simply because federal law was cited. And the federal law in this question was not the law that created the tort claim. So if you jumped on the idea that it was a federal question and that's how jurisdiction exists, you've misread the question, because remember, it says it's a state law tort claim, right?
Don't read facts into the fact pattern that are not there. That is a common mistake that people made, that overthinking it and saying, I'm even seeing it. I'm not trying to call you out, Donald, but I see you saying like, C could be right if water treaty was covered in the Constitution, and that don't go down those roads. Like, don't, right. These are not hypos, right? We don't want to be like you're talking to your law professor after class and saying, what if we change the scenario? What if we tweak this? What if that happened? Just take the facts as they've been given to you in the question.
And I think that's a good point. This is one of those situations where, and I'd be curious if this student who was talking about that, if they previewed as being yes, because it was federal question.
Well, versus... he did a great job. He said, but because I'm not certain, I'll go with my first answer, D, which is exactly what you want to do. When your mind starts to wander like that and starts to go down these rabbit trails, you want to reel yourself back in and say, but what was my instinct at first? Go with that.
Yeah. So gold star for you, right? Because you trusted your intuition. So now let's look at answer D, and that was correct. And so congratulations to all of you that got it right. I bet more than 25% of you got it right. So here's why D is correct. We've already seen that the supplemental jurisdiction statute allows jurisdiction over claims that we can go ahead and combine the amounts. And it requires that you put the same cases together, they come out of the same case or controversy. In this action, both of the claims arise from the water runoff from the neighboring property, and so they meet the standard of the statute. But even if you didn't know, that's still the best answer that's there, because the supplemental claim is going to be enough to add on, and it's not going to withhold supplemental jurisdiction. So I think it's really, in some ways, an easier answer if you don't try to get too far, as you said, Megan, down the rabbit trail or into the weeds on this. And you just simply keep in mind that the answer that said the ranchers are diverse from the developer, yep. And both ranchers' claims arise from the same facts, yep. Those are both true statements, aren't they? And knowing that, then I think you can say, Yeah, I could get that. But here's what's really interesting. When people look at the answer choices before they answer, they miss this all the time, don't they?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is that it was about, what did you say, 26% of people got this one correct. On our little study group here today, everyone who answered an answer put down D. And on the previews, almost every preview was correct, what they just assumed. And so I think that very much shows that when you cannot look at the answer choices first, obviously this group did wildly better than 26%. I find that very interesting. The not being able to see the answer choices that will distract you can be very helpful.
Yeah, so there you go. Who knew? I knew. All right, so now let's move on. All right. So when you're answering a multi-state question, there are three things I want you to keep in mind that you just saw from this example. The first thing is to try and preview your answer. You saw that if you do that before you look at the answer choices, that is the preferred methodology. Now, as we're going to see in a minute, you can't always do that. But when you can, when the choice is clear enough to you that you can preview an answer, I'm going to tell you that, as you saw today in this experiment, people will get the answer right if they can preview it. And why? It's because you're working in your non-conscious larger brain and you're just using your intuition and logic. The second thing to keep in mind is that if you can't preview an answer, what you want to do, and we're going to see this in a minute, is to take a quick look at the answer choices themselves so that you have the ability then to start to get some framework. And we're going to do that in just a minute. And then the third thing, most importantly, is trust your intuition. Never try to outthink the question. Don't try to force your way into the question or move through it in a way that's going to be problematic for you. I think when you do that, you're going to find that overall, it's going to be challenging for you to get to what you want. And therefore, it's important to just stay in that intuitive standpoint.
Yeah, it feels really scary, but I think empirically it just yields better results. So even though it doesn't feel like the most confident thing, I think if people, when they try it, they're like, oh, the numbers speak for themselves.
Absolutely. Then the next thing is that after you've done the question and you've looked at the answer explanations and done that, certainly in practice, this is the time to start adding to your mind maps. If you're in BarMaps, you've already got a preset mind map. If you're not, you can draw your own or make your own. We use a program called MindMeister. I really love that. But whatever way you're doing, this is the time to add to the mind map. And you could see in this question, you might have had to raise some information about supplemental jurisdiction. You might have needed to know a bit more about the diversity rules. And if you're missing something, or even if you're getting it right, but you didn't know exactly why, this is when you go and add into your mind map.
Yeah, this is like a key piece of the puzzle. I think don't skip this step, please.
And when we see people adding to their mind maps and working with their mind maps, this is when we see real success. I know a lot of you are like, oh, I don't have time, I don't want to do it. But trust me, traditional note-taking is nowhere near as effective as mind mapping. And doing the mind map right after you've answered the question, it's fresh in your mind why you got the answer right or wrong, and you've got context for it, right? If I were to just ask you to add information to your jurisdiction mind map about supplemental jurisdiction, I think most of your eyes would glaze over. But if we've just done this question, it makes a lot of sense. Now it's like, oh, okay, I get why I should be talking about that. And that's what helps your brain fix it and locate it when you need it again. So that's really what we're saying is in terms of a structure. And really what we're getting at overall is that selective intuition allows you to use your whole mind and your whole brain. It allows you to use not only your gut reaction and your logic and your background, but also everything you've studied. I don't know how many of you studied supplemental jurisdiction before we just did this question, and yet you got the question right, a question that most people get wrong. How did that happen? We locked you off, we forced you to use your intuition, and when we forced you to use your intuition, voila, it works for you. So I think it's a really great way to prove the point. Now we're going to make it a little bit harder. I'm not going to lie. We're going to give you a question that's not quite so direct, although it also only had a 25% correct answer choice. So are we ready for that one, Megan?
Yep.
Here we go. Question 9 on our countdown. A pharmaceutical retailer sued a drug manufacturer in federal court for antitrust and unfair competition violations under federal and state law. After the parties completed discovery, the retailer submitted a pretrial narrative statement designating a broad set of facts and issues to be tried. The manufacturer disputed the statement and submitted a much narrower one. At the final pretrial conference, the court entered its final order, ruling in favor of the retailer's broader statement as the one the court would read to the jury during voir dire and would use to define the facts and issues to be tried. The manufacturer's attorney is concerned that trying many of the facts and issues listed in the pretrial order would reveal litigation strategies important in other actions pending against the manufacturer. The call to question is, what's the best way for the manufacturer's attorney to seek relief from the court's ruling on the pretrial statement? Now, this presents us with a different kind of problem. This is not a yes or no or a binary question, is it? It's an open-ended question.
Yes, exactly. There's not a yes-no answer.
And because of that, it's now harder to preview an answer, I think, for a lot of people. So what happens here is that in this circumstance, you have to start looking at the answer choices to give you some context, some direction generally. And so we're not saying you never look at the answer choices. Here's an example of a time when I think you need to do that, but you don't want to go down the rabbit trail. So let's look at the answer choices that were being given to help us get the parameters of what we're looking at. The first answer choice A says that the best way for the manufacturer's attorney to seek relief from the court's ruling on this pretrial statement is to appeal from the final pretrial order, arguing that it's overbroad on its face. So I've identified here the appeal from the final pretrial order. That's one set of options. Let's see what else we've got. Answer choice B says that what could be done for the manufacturer's attorney is to object in trial court and appeal any adverse ruling on the objection. And again, I've identified objecting in the trial court because that's different than answer choice A. You see where we're going here, Megan, with these two?
Yeah, definitely. Different choices right. when you would make your objection or appeal.
Right. Okay. So now let's look at answer choice C. Object in the trial court. So we're getting some consistency here. Now, I might stop even at that point and say, it looks like part of the answer is going to be, do we appeal in final pretrial order or object in trial court? That seems to be one. But now answer choice C is giving us the same result, but for a different reason. File a motion to delay the trial. And then finally, answer choice D, it's a 3-in-1 kind of answer. Object in the trial court and move to modify the order to prevent manifest injustice. So now what I want to do is ask all of you in the chat box, having just seen that, and we've not looked at any of these answer choices in depth, I want you to preview your answer. And I'm going to read the question again. Pharmaceutical retailer sues a drug manufacturer in federal court, antitrust violations under federal and state law. Parties complete discovery. Retailer submits a pretrial narrative statement that designates broad set of facts and issues. The manufacturer disputes the statement, submits a much narrower one. At the final pretrial conference, the court enters its final order, ruling in favor of the retailer's broad statement as the one the court's going to read to define facts and issues. Manufacturer is concerned that trying many of the facts and issues listed in the pretrial order would reveal their strategies important in other actions pending against manufacturer. And then it asks us which is the best way for manufacturer's attorney to seek relief from the court's ruling. So I think what happens now is that with just that in mind, I would start by saying, I've got 3 that start objecting the trial court and 1 that says appeal from the final pretrial order. So that's the first cut level for me. Is that where you would be?
Yes, I would first want to figure out which place I thought was the proper place to make my objection or appeal.
And I'm not sure that I would go much further than that in reading the answer choices in order to use my selective intuition. So now what I want you to do, participants, is go into the chat box and tell us A, B, C, or D, and the reason that you think that would be the case, if you can, right?
Great. Yeah, this is interesting. I'm not surprised. I think this is a harder one than the first. We're getting a lot more over the board. So we've got some A's, some D's, a B. So yeah, we're seeing some more. And it's interesting to me because this is a harder one to preview, like you said, right? It's a much trickier one. You actually have to go into the questions to be able to, and then you see the potential answers and then your brain starts to play tricks on you a little, right? Like, ooh, only one is appeal from final pretrial order. Does it make it more likely that that one's wrong because there's three of the other, or does it make it more likely that it's right? So,
But again, if we took just that, if I had said in the fact pattern that the choice would be appeal from the order or object in trial court and why, I think it would have been easier for people to preview it. So what you're doing is, if you look at the screen here, I've put into italics what was the same or different, and the rest of it I'm hoping you don't read, okay? Fundamentally, that's what I want, is for you to try and preview it. Okay, let's see what happens here as we go through. Which answer most closely matched yours? So let's see where we are again. All right, if you chose answer A, this answer choice, is incorrect. And the reason that it's incorrect is that an immediate appeal from a final pretrial order isn't possible because there was no final judgment in the action. That's really all you need to know. There's more information here, but you can't preserve it for appeal. And so appealing from that point, you can't really do because we don't have a final judgment in the overall action. And I think everything else really is a distractor, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's, you want to drill down to the core of the conflict here, which is, in this case, way testing, and with this answer they're testing, do you know that there has to be a final judgment in order to appeal?
Exactly. So if you chose answer A, you're incorrect. And I think the reason you're incorrect is just there's no final judgment, and everything else is not so important. Let's keep moving on. What about answer B? This said object in the trial court and appeal any adverse ruling on the objection. This answer is also incorrect. And if you make an immediate appeal from any adverse ruling, then it's not possible because, again, there's no final judgment in the action. But more importantly, objecting at the trial court level doesn't preserve the issue for appeal. And so it's a weirdly worded answer, isn't it? Right? Objecting in the trial court, we now know that's going to be correct, that particular piece. But to appeal any adverse ruling, you can't do it because, again, you don't have a final judgment in the action. So if you keep it simple, that's a choice you shouldn't select. It should be obvious to you, we don't have a final judgment, so you can't appeal it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let's look. Answer C. Oh, okay. Those of you that chose D are happy again, but let's look at answer C. C says object in the trial court and file a motion to delay the trial. If you object, that won't preserve the issue for appeal. And if you make a motion to delay the trial, how does that help you modify the final pretrial order? It just doesn't get you where you want to go. This is an answer choice that's not explicit in the fact pattern, but it's common sense, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm trying to see if I don't think anybody put C down at all.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
I think that was one. So good job, like, honestly, because I think C is the answer that's maybe the most off topic. And so good job for recognizing that.
Yeah, not getting distracted, although I know people get distracted all the time, and then they answered C. All right, well, let's look at why D is correct. Under Federal Civil Procedure Rule 16E, when the trial court issues an order about the trial plan after this final pretrial conference, the order can be modified for only one reason, and that's to prevent manifest injustice. So if you're thinking about what to put in your mind map, that's the piece to put in, wouldn't you think?
Exactly, because the key with this one is if you knew, which it's totally fine that you guys are this, like, we're very far from the exam, so I don't necessarily expect a lot of people to know this one off the top of their heads. But as you're studying and you know that the requirement or the standard is to prevent manifest injustice, then as soon as you saw that in answer choice D, that's what you're going to narrow. That's your intuition, is you're going to know, oh, manifest injustice, that's the key, that's the standard, that's what we have to meet here. Great, perfect, mark it and move on.
Yeah. All right, so we got through two of them. Next week, we are going to move on. And boy, if you thought these were hard, wait till you get to next week's. Yeah, I do hope this is helpful for people, regardless of whether you got them right or wrong. I just hope the process of looking at these different kinds of questions, as we go through them, I think it's going to help both in terms of substance, but certainly in terms of the strategy and the approach. And that's really what we wanted to carry away for you.
So definitely join us next week. We're going to go through the next 2, maybe 3 questions, and I think it's really helpful. Also, this was great, like, in community, to have you guys showing your process as well, so that other students can see what's your thought process. Why do you think that? Okay, I see that. Like, here's a different way maybe that someone's looking at it. So hopefully this is helpful. We would love to have you join us next week so you can do this. And for people who are not watching live, come and join us live so that you can participate in the chat as well. Because unfortunately, you're going to miss out on the chat part.
Absolutely. All right, Megan, thank you and appreciate it. Enjoy your Halloween. And for all of you, thanks for being with us today. Hope that this was helpful, and have a great study week, and we'll get at it. And next week we'll come back and take on some more of the 10 hardest MBE questions ever. So good to see everybody. Take care. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.